Welcome to IAYTD, and today we're outlining the video game series Assassin's Creed. We'll walk through what the series is all about, what makes it great and not great, and the future of the franchise, including a feature film in the works. The very first Assassin's Creed game launched in 2007. It told a story set in the Third Crusade around the city of Jerusalem. An ancient order called the Templars sought a powerful artifact, and only a small group of opposing heroes called the Assassins could stop them. However, the game also offered a second perspective in current day. Templars in today's world were using a machine called an animus that could place people into memories. So they used a character named Desmond to relive the memories of the assassin Altair, in hopes that they could find out where this artifact, called a piece of Eden, was located. The game bounced back and forth between these two stories, but the majority of the game took place in Jerusalem. The game promised a lot, mostly that it offered a huge open world and fun ways to travel in it, usually by crawling on buildings, leaping off buildings, and free running throughout the cities. It was seen as the spiritual successor to the old Prince of Persia games, which used to do very similar things. It also offered a campaign that allowed for flexibility. You had to assassinate certain characters, ones that actually went missing in actual real history, but you had the freedom as to how to achieve this. While the first game was well received mostly, the second Assassin's Creed made everything better. Still following Desmond in current day, he now uses the Animus to live through the memories of an assassin named Ezio in 15th century Italy. This location offered up bigger cities and more ways to travel through them. The cities in Italy were also much more colorful and vibrant. Ezio's adventures lasted throughout this game, as well as two spin-offs called Brotherhood and Revelations. These games focused much on the historical aspect, but also introduced a larger mythology, one that hinted at a race that existed long before humankind. This science fiction element was mostly seen as an unwelcome addition by the fans. The main draw is to dive into these historical cities and explore them, not this overarching sci-fi mythology. These games also furthered the idea of stealth gameplay from the first. You could blend in with crowds, you could attack from hiding places, and even steal your opponent's weapon and use it back on them. The third Assassin's Creed came out in 2012, sending Desmond back into the American Revolution as a Native American named Connor, whose mother is a Mohawk woman and whose father is a British officer and Templar. Connor is trained to be an assassin, but he also uses his skills in the wild to outsmart the Templars. This game introduced new dynamics to help make nature feel much more fluid, such as free running through trees and along cliffs. There was also a hunting dynamic, where you could kill animals, sell meat, and trade pelts. This game also introduced naval combat, where you could travel in boats to help navigate the eastern coast of the United States. You also took part in big battles and met characters such as George Washington. Now at this point, the larger mythology story arcs were becoming even more prominent and outrageous. There's now a solar flare coming to destroy the world, and only this piece of Eden can stop it. Spoiler, but the world isn't destroyed, as Desmond engages and negotiates with several ancient beings who have various agendas. This was often quoted as one of the biggest downfalls of this game, along with the fact that the game felt increasingly bloated, meaning that there was almost too much to do. Too much to do, you ask? Let me give context. In these games, as you wander these huge open worlds, you have tasks to do and things to collect. Maybe it's doing a few missions to help an ally. Maybe it's collecting a certain type of object scattered throughout the city. It became more and more of a time sink though, as Assassin's Creed 3 had an amount of tasks and collectibles that seemed insurmountable. They also distracted from the main story instead of complementing it, and most of the tasks seemed menial and unimportant. Luckily though, developer Ubisoft got the message, and their next installment, Black Flag, fixed a lot of these wrongs, and gave us what is undoubtedly one of the highlights of the franchise. Black Flag focuses almost entirely on protagonist Edward Kenway, a pirate during the 18th century who roams the Caribbean on his ship, the Jackdaw. The naval combat of Assassin's Creed 3 worked so well that they utilized it much more here, allowing for seamless boat-to-land transition, focusing on discovering small islands and engaging with other ships. The Jackdaw was also upgradable, so there were incentives to collecting loot so that you could make it stronger in combat. Black Flag also made the current day story almost entirely optional, so people could hop right back into the pirate story if they wanted to. By this point in time, Assassin's Creed had become almost annualized, meaning that a new game arrived every year. With substantial games like this, full of content and stuff to do, it was inevitable that people might start to get fatigued. At this point, Black Flag had released for both last generation consoles such as PS3 and Xbox 360, as well as new consoles PS4 and Xbox One. However, for the next iteration, Ubisoft chose to release two different games during the same month, releasing Assassin's Creed Rogue for last generation and Assassin's Creed Unity for new consoles. Rogue focused on naval combat again, and tried to create a protagonist that was interesting, focusing on a Templar for the first time, but it suffered from the fact that many players had moved on to a new console, and they were tired of familiar gameplay mechanics. Unity, on the other hand, had a slew of other problems. Unity took place in Paris during the French Revolution. Many people chose to pass on Unity, mostly for a tremendous amount of negative press prior to release about bugs and errors. Some were purely aesthetic, but some also made your character drop through the world or get stuck and would make you restart entire missions. These bugs, along with general fatigue of the series, kept a lot of people from playing Unity. The latest Assassin's Creed entry was in 2015, called Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Syndicate focused on a Victorian-era London and featured supporting characters like Charles Darwin and Karl Marx. Syndicate was a solid game, probably one of my favorites, but again it suffered from general overexposure to this franchise. Following Syndicate, Ubisoft released that they were going to take more time in between Assassin's Creed games, hopefully to focus on innovation instead of repetition. In addition to these main games, over 10 games have come out that haven't been considered main entries, either small focus stories that you could download, or games for handheld devices. Now these games are popular, but the franchise is about to become much more well known, with a feature film in the works for late 2016, starring Michael Fassbender. Fassbender will star as a completely new assassin, not tied to the games at all, but likely featuring a similar mythology. So are you excited for the movie? Does this interest you? Hopefully you learned a lot here about the history of Assassin's Creed, what made it good and what made it not so great at certain moments, the peaks and valleys. So thanks for watching this week's What Is, and we'll see you next week for another What Is Wednesday.